Savagery, Part 5. So how, asked a woman, do we get this water to fall from the sky again? They were sitting in a semicircle around Baba. It was late afternoon, the sun going down in a lovely bronze burst that the dry dust of the plain caused. Well, said Baba, first we must plant trees. Trees? Oh, you mean those things by the old well? Baba laughed delightedly. Trees, real trees, juicy, ripe green trees, trees that will give us shelter from this barbaric sun, help cool down the climate and stop the water cycle again. The water cycle going again. He wiped his sweaty face and his sleeves and looked around happily. The people were puzzled. Climate, water cycle. Baba could be very obtuse sometimes. A Baka who knew all about the water cycle and the climate and the terrible global warming that had started so long ago and was still happening, smiled to himself. It would take centuries for all this to happen. Even if they started now, Baba was getting ahead of himself, but he looked so happy. Abaka didn't have the heart to say anything. Baba smiled at Abaka, who looked like a proper young student now, and patted his arm. Suddenly, tears stung his eyes. He had begun to look like his son, or was it only his imagination and wishful thinking? But no, he mustn't think of it. The tree plantation drive began. The two scrawny old neem trees by the old well, Melia Azardita, Baba thought gleefully to himself, became parent to a tiny patch of seedlings, tended lovingly by the people of the village. On one of her wandering, a little girl called Sarah found these things that look a bit like seeds, so I thought I'd take them to you, Baba, and thus began to patch off the blue pine trees growing side by side with the neem trees. Baba wasn't quite sure if that was possible because he seemed to remember that neem and blue pine belonged to the different climates. But if they were both growing, who was to complain? At the moment they looked a little like sticks growing out of the ground. But the first leaves heralded the great forest that would cover the land a century later. And when a people spoke of the rebirth, then they started with two trees. It was also the two trees that 5 years later caused a rift between the villagers. Winter came with unusual cold that year, and because the land was a desert, at night it grew very cold indeed. Villagers who had chosen the old way, the way of leaving things as they were, wanted to cut down the trees to use as firewood to warm their homes. Baba and his friends were horrified, cut down the trees that they had planted for a new life, the trees they had watered, sharing their precious rations of water that was running out in the old well. Abakar, now a young man of 18, and his friends started standing guard over the trees. Baba frowned to himself. Sometimes something had to be done about this. They were old and there were cries. and the things were all happening around.